So we have today a return visitor here, a guest, Dr. Rachel Anevski, author of Train Your Successor and Accounting for Times. Um, and there is, before we started recording, I realized that, before we go any further, we need to hit record because, there were some gems that were already discussed. And so there are a lot of folks who are starting up their own shops, right? And they're going out on their own. They decided, hey, I'm done with corporate. I want to go back into what might give me more purpose, and I want to start my own business, right? And there are some of the things here is going to be maybe eye opening for some of you. For others, it should be common sense, but we still, right? There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack. So, Dr. Nevsky, what are you seeing out there in the real world these days?
Am I seeing in the real world these days? So, I'm first of all, thank you for having me back. That means something to me. Um, and and it's interesting. I think that lots of people that go on podcasts today, over the last couple of weeks, are having, at least in my industry, right, in the consulting industry of CPAs and CPA firms and professional services. A lot of questions that are being asked of us are, you know, what's going to happen? What does the future look like? Um, and I think that it's great to be that fortune teller and great to have that magic 8 ball and shake it up and say, uh, am I right? Yes, no, maybe. Um, but I think it's really important to step into the now and see what's really happening. And so that means a couple of things. So follow the bouncing ball here. We have, um, private equity is in a state right now that I want to call Jello, right? The messy middle. My friend Jody Padar would call it the messy middle of lots of things right now. So we're kind of like refreezing, if you will, in this state. That's what's now happening. Private equity came in, they got a big bang. Everyone's talking about them. They got lots of like marketing aspect of this. It was funny. Someone said to me, it was like a whole bunch of young kids took this one course at Harvard, and that's who's swooping everyone up. Um, but what we're seeing is kind of it being halted right now, or stalled in a way. So there was initially an idea that in a couple of years there would be a second cell or a surge of something. We're seeing that taking a little bit of a step back. What you and I were chatting about a little while ago was this, idea of, well, what's the shakeout because of that? And, what does that mean for folks? And so it's uncomfortable for people. Not everyone wants to be part of this large private equity backed or VC backed company where you're just a number, right? So instead, they decide to fraction off. And so this surge of, and now not only in CPAville uh, are there being solopreneurs now, but there's about 90,000 fractionals in space. These are your CHROs, your CMOs, your CTOs, CIOs, CFOs, and now, CPAs, standing alone, solopreneurs, or fractional work. And I've been in this community, this fractional community, for about, I don't know, 12 or 13 years. And it's really interesting to see the life cycle of what happens to people that leave corporate and decide to open up their own companies. And I really believe that if you're living in the now, you're recognizing that it's this kind of I don't know, state of, well, what is going to happen next? What are we waiting for to really like hit again? Um, and you're starting to see lots of people talk about the independent firm and a fancy term, strategic optionality, and what that means. You don't have to be one type anymore. Now there's all of these variations, and that's pretty cool. But in the work that I do, aligning who you are with what kinds of options you have is going to be kind of the puzzle pieces. So that's about what's happening right now, right? So still some stalling on private equity, some fractioning off of solopreneurs, and then really kind of understanding that there's a variety of different models and places you could work as a CPA now.
There is chaos if depending on who you ask, right? There were all these articles about a lot of our big firms who are going through these PE-backed mergers and acquisitions and the fallout that came from it. And we were discussing that last I think it was last week. You know, there were folks who were like, "Hey, look, we were part of a PE-backed M&A, and we're fine, right?" There's yes, there are headlines, and where the opposite is true, where a lot of the more senior people left, as did some of the clients because they didn't like how it was operated. There is variability, and that mess I think is somewhat needed, right? That there is a every now and then there's a shakeup that could be beneficial in that. Again, there are going to be folks who say, you know what, I think I've been doing this long enough. I know what I'm talking about in terms of my work. Why don't I go try to do this on my own, be my own boss, and live life on my own terms, right? And for me, forgive me for those who are going to try to start nitpicking the analogy, right? But I almost put this akin to, say, real estate agents, right? Everyone in the mothers is like, hey, you could be your own boss, make your own hours, you can make all this money. You become an agent, realize that none of the leads are given to you. You have to go hunt your own business. You have to be your own bookkeeper. You have to be your own. And out of the agents that decide, hey, I'm gonna be my own boss, maybe single digit percentages actually make it. Right? There's a reason.
Make it well or become well known, actually like hit.
I don't think there's
Scale.
necessarily anything wrong with that. In that some folk, look, hopefully there aren't that many people who are caught by strays and like really destroy their lives over it. More times than not, I would argue that I started my own shop. Maybe I had varying levels of success, and I realized I don't want to do this anymore. You know what? I do. I want to go back to a firm where there's structure, and I don't have to deal with HR. I don't have to deal with being my own administrator. I don't have to be my own bill collector. I don't have to do this. I could just work and focus on my work, right? Whereas some folks will say, you know what? I like this. Maybe I'll partner up, and maybe I'll outsource a couple of things, and now I'm golden. The percentage of that, I would argue, is still low. But I don't like. For me, if someone asks me, should I not? For me, it's more based on the intent. Like, what are the expectations, right? And realistically, what is it that you think you bring to the table, right? And if like some of my closer friends, I'll be like, look, I say this from a place of love. There's a high likelihood that you're not gonna succeed in terms of you're not gonna have like some massive big shop. However, I think the journey might be important to you in understanding, hey, like there's more options out there. If you do hate your job, understand that, hey, look, you did more than other people, where you just sit there quietly in quiet desperation, thinking, I should have, maybe I could have, maybe, right? You gave it a shot. If it works, great. If it doesn't, your skill set should still transfer, right? So now you're in a situation where you know what it's like to be management, understand more of these things. And when you go back into a firm, arguably, you know how things work better and you can be more valuable to that firm.
I mean, and that's really that's my hope, right? That human connection will prevail over this kind of shakeout. It's interesting. If you were to Google like what an accountant, like a picture of an accountant, there's a guy, an old guy with his pocket protector and his piles of paperwork, and he's just sitting there by himself and the numbers. That's what people are doing. People are leaving to be that dude, right? Um, and it's everything is secular for me. What's happening in private equity happened in the 90s with the physicians. So the answers are there. The tell is there. You could follow the script if you're really paying attention. Um, what I think that what I not that what I think is going to happen is going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm not a psychic. It's going to happen. History proves it. But the people that are leaving, we already know that only a small percentage of accountants have the innate skill set to be a business developer and a relationship person. It's the reason why you choose accounting. And I've done more than I ever want to even acknowledge interviews, exit interviews, onboarding, terminations in the line of work that I have as an HR professional, as a director of human resources early on in my career for a public accounting firm. The reason why everyone wants to get into accounting is because the numbers make sense. It's not because they are client facing or they're going to networking events or they're speaking publicly or writing articles or being an expert in, or sitting in their office by themselves figuring out how to get their next client. That is never the reason. In fact, when people most leave the industry, it's at a critical point where we are asking them to transition from learner, teacher, to sales professional, to business developer, to relationship seeker, advisor. That's when most decide to go from a role of learning and teaching, and going to work for somebody else where they can be a part of a department. And so to see this many people leave industry to be on their own at such an experienced level, it's real interesting to me. And I'm wondering what the timeline is before those people who have gone out on their own realize that freedom is great, your hours are great, you know, money per hour is great, but that you miss the people. And not only do you miss the people, you miss the access to knowledge, you miss the interaction, you miss opportunities to learn and grow, to learn something new, a different industry perhaps, or to lead people, to really exercise your leadership ability, to advise people to have access to new technologies that you might not be able to afford. There is value to being part of rather than being solo. And I think that there are some people who recognize this and are trying to help build community amongst solopreneurs. That's a great conversation piece. But at the end of the day, you're still actually becoming, that guy in that picture with the stacks of paperwork. I mean, if you're listening to this and your desk looks like what I'm describing, you're already there, you know? And when you look around, it's, pictures of your family, fantastic. Maybe your ego wall behind you, but your next call is not to somebody who's aligned with you, but it's external facing. It's old after a bit. It does.
You touched on something very interesting because I would definitely not consider myself someone who had a traditional path on my CPA career, right? Like, though it's not traditional, I would also argue on the flip side that it's a very common path, right? So, so for those who are scratching their heads, like, what the hell is this moron talking about? Your traditional path is graduate school, get your CPA, work for a CPA firm, preferably Big Four. And the ideal one is you work for Big Four X number of years, you pay your dues, do your due diligence, and then if you want, if either A, go partner track, or you decide at a certain level of seniority, you work for a private company and you make boatloads of money, right? Ideally on a CFO track on that respect. Um, right. And through my years here at this point, and some people look at me funny, but my experience is that the majority of people with their CPAs don't actually do strict CPA work. They maintain the CPA, they have their CPA, right? But when you ask them what they do, a lot of them are like, I do FP&A, I do finance, general finance, I do this, that, and third. Like, okay, so are you doing audit? Are you doing attestation? Are you doing taxes? No. Okay, cool, right? It's the other side of this is that range in which that you can work. Just because you have a CPA attached to your name doesn't mean that you have to grind away in an office and hate life. Some people actually do enjoy the idea of, like, I don't have to talk to people. I hate all people. I just want to sit here and do work and have a reasonably stable job field where, realistically I should be able to get a job just about wherever, right? And you could argue that's an accountant slash CPA field, generally speaking. And then, correct.
Stability, right? Always have a job. And I think that behaviorally, that's the shakeup here, is that people like to know where they work and who they work for. Uh, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs in a very basic level. Need like security, stability, know who my paycheck gets signed from, right? And where the industry is going, private, public, wherever, TAS, CAS, forensics, FP&A, I mean, you name it. There is 19,000 iterations of what you can do with those three letters, truly and remarkably. Um, but the it's been shaky ground. You could go, it's so funny. Joel Cooperman said to me, and I worked for Citron Cooperman for a hot minute. Joel Cooperman would come into a room and he would say, if I were you, and this would be to like a sea of people, he would say to everyone, if I were you, I wouldn't leave Citron Cooperman because I'm going to buy the firm that you go to. So you're just going to end up right back here having, Groundhog Day, listening to me say, I don't know where you're going because I'm going to buy your firm and you're coming right back here to me. And he did that, right? Like he absolutely did that. Fast trajectory, fast growth, lots of acquisitions. It was strategy. And so I think that that's really scary for a lot of accountants, CPAs, in whatever area you are. You could be FP&A at Tiffany's, right, in back office, and they decide to sell tomorrow, or God forbid, but companies are changing, companies are being bought, and that's what's happening a lot of the time now. Is you may have signed up to work for BCG CPAs, and next week it's HTC CPAs, and then 3 weeks from now it's private equity owned, and now all of your senior partners have left, and now they're bringing in an HR director that is from the mattress industry, and you're like, where am I? It's not, it doesn't feel quite like home anymore. Let me click my heels again and see where it takes me. And that doesn't provide certainty to the accountant. So what's fight or flight? Do I stay here and decide, you know, today I'm this, tomorrow I could be this, I don't know what they're going to pay me next week, whatever, or do I flee the scene and create more control again? And that's your solopreneurs. Those are people who are really seeking that controlled environment. And so my prediction or the experience or the history then predicates that those people that have gone out and created this silo for themselves to have control over their destiny, when the industry restabilizes, they'll come back.
That's the important key thing here, right? There's sooner or later there's going to be a return to equilibrium, right? And again, when the dust settles or when the tides go out, there's going to be, I would argue, a large number of folks who decide, hey, you know what, I don't need a boss. Like, I mean, I need a boss, and I'm done being my own boss. Like, I'm done telling myself what I need to do. Because again, the few that I do see that I wholeheartedly expect them to thrive over the long haul, they have their systems. They have a process where they have all the infrastructure, including a support group, including a community, including a circle of people who can keep them accountable and so on and so forth, like coaching and mentorships and all that. There are a lot. Then, you know, but the other folks, again, when they start hearing from their colleagues, hey, like that new leadership that we were all kind of like grumbling about, they're gone. Now things are better. The HR team is more in sync with what the management needs and what the employees need to get their jobs done and not hate life, right? And for those who, you know, as I read through a lot of the forums from, you know, other places, and they're like, you know, oh my God, these people left. And, you know, we had this discussion last time of, look, if some of the star people leave, before you say, oh my God, the sky's falling, let's jump ship because everything sucks, take a moment to say, hey, is there really opportunity here? Like, if I just wait a little bit for the dust to settle, is there an opportunity for me to step up and say, hey, I could, you know what, that position is open. There's a, nothing, it's a vacuum now, right? So in a way, if I step up to the plate and if I can perform, now I have more opportunity to learn more, expand, and grow. But likewise, if truly in your heart of hearts, like it's really crashing and burning, and you just need something better, look, if you have your CPA, you do what you're supposed to do, right? Like actually learn your job, do it well, learn mastery. You should be able to get a job somewhere else, right? And you know what? Again, nothing is permanent in life. That's the beauty of it, right? Some people panic, but that's the beauty of life. There's nothing that's permanent.
So let's talk about mastery for a second, because there's this theory that mastery is 10,000 hours of work, 7 to 10 years of experience, D1 athlete level mastery, right? Like there's this script. I think AI has hacked that script for sure. And mastery is now, first of all, it starts later, right? So now you're not doing like um kick the ball on the wall. You know, it's not that low level. Now it's, it's not enter, see this, do that. Enter this number in line 9 on the tax return. It's learn this software in 30 seconds and just make sure that number got to line 9 correctly. You don't have to put it there anymore. You just got to make sure it's there. The level of mastery starts later. So entry levels begin as seniors, and it doesn't take 7 to 10 years to become mastered. Now it's 3 to 5. We have to do market adjustment for that. We have to get rid of this thought process that you are an experienced or mastery level when you're 40, when you're gray, when you've put in the time, when you've done it this way. That's garbaged. It's dead. We, put a button on that. That's over. There's a lot of things that are actually over having all of this transition. Um, what what's funny is that, so Jessica Levin and I, when we wrote Accounting for Times between the years of 2021 and 2023, I remember her saying to me, who are we writing this book for? And I was like, I don't know, accountants, right? Like that's what we do. And she's like, no, we're writing this book for the independent firm. Those are the firms that are going to matter. Those are the firms that are really going to maintain, you know, the tradition of being an accounting firm, where they are educating young accountants coming out of college, deciding what they want to be. They're the ones that are going to have experienced the most transition, but over time, that's who we're writing this book for. And when I look back now and I look through some of the pages of that book, and I speak to firms and I hear what's happening in the industry, and more consultants talking about the independent firm and what it means to stay independent, and seeing these solopreneurs say, really, I am independent, right? You know, um, in a if you had to timestamp just that word alone, and even this morning, waking up to the Pentagon conversations, right? Independence, all of that is really what is, to the question you asked me right when we started, what is top of mind right now? That is what should be talked about. That is the key to all of the information that we're learning right now. How to independently, learn, grow, succeed, all of these things.
Way, I feel like one of the opportunities in my brain for those who go out on their own, it solves for something potentially. I don't know the percentages. If I had a venture guess, it'll still be somewhat small out of that population. But oftentimes I feel like when you go out on your own, it's you don't really like where you're at. And there's a calling in you that says there has to be more. Like, right, for me, it's when it comes down to fundamentals, it's purpose, right? It's does what I'm, is the work that I'm doing in life purposeful? Is there a purpose that gives me meaning, that gives me a reason to feel like I'm worth something? Which, that could get really ugly really quick. But when you sit in a firm, you feel like you're not affecting change. You don't feel like the work you're doing has purpose. You decide to go out on your own and realize, oh, the work is still important. Maybe it's just the work, what I'm working on might shift. Like, so for me, there's again, that trope of a CPA is that boring person with that's, a curmudgeon just sitting there like, I don't bother me with this nonsense. And then yet we go to these CPA networking meetings and events and meet other folks. They're a lot of them are normal people. They like to go out and have fun. They like to have conversation. They like, right? They're people. And some of them, I realize, hey, when I talk about your early experiences in your career, again, a lot of us went the typical track. Hey, go work for a company, grind away, and sometimes work that you hate, right? And then you realize, hey, I realized that after X number of years, I realized, hey, if I just try some new things and try to accept that there's variability in our profession and there are paths forward in that,
Mm.
the world becomes a lot more interesting, right? Again, to the early aspects of why did you become a CPA? Because it's stable, it's secure, there's always a job, da da da. But then on the back end of it, there's also I remember hearing, hey, like everyone needs a CPA, everyone wants to talk to a CPA early in my career. Again, that's not what I saw. However, now in this past role that I've had, everyone's like, hey, do you know any CPAs you can refer me to? Hey, do you know any CPAs? Da, da, da. Like, can you help me with this? Da, 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 da. You're like, why? Because
Mm.
anything, well, most, let's say majority of things still has to funnel through some kind of CPA or whether it's tax professional, whether, right? It funnels down. And so in a way you become, if you embrace that, you become the person who says,
Mhm.
either A, I'll be a gatekeeper or I'll be an enabler. Like I'll connect you or I'll make sure that hopefully this is used in that manner, but the snake oil salesmen, the charlatans get kept at bay, right? And those who are really willing
Mhm.
to help service our clients and customers and do good in the world, I'll make sure I at least try my best to connect you with the people so you can do more good work, right? It's for me, I love that work, right? And I realized,
You're a natural connector. So
but it
we
makes me
already
feel
see
good.
that. Anyone
I
who knows
try.
you knows
I
that.
try. But if you would have told me 15 years ago, hey Alex, you're actually going to be able to take the CPA and do something more than just looking at spreadsheets, more than looking at reports and contracts, and I would have been like, yeah, whoever that dealer is that you're talking to, do me a favor, give me their number, right? Because I didn't see that.
No, well, you're not going to see that, and that's the unfortunate story that we tell the community, right? Early on, this is the script, and I hold all professors responsible for this. The script is you have to work at Big Four, you have to do 3 years. All it's so old, it's so outdated. The narrative really should be more exploration of all of the things you can do. The I don't know, from business development to academia to advisory services, consulting services, industry specific, um, working with legal, writing opportunities, speaking opportunities, the advisory, back office advisory, entertainment. There is nothing that we do in life that uh, you will need a CPA for your entire life. You just will. Um, and I think that there's comfort in knowing that there's this large community. I don't think that we do a good enough job describing all of the awesomeness it is. And I would still never want to be you because math is not my game. But at the same token, if there was a way to get that credential and still be able to do what I'm doing, I think that would make me quite genius. But um, really, so many different aspects of things that you guys get to touch and experience and explore, and so from that perspective, what a wonderful world, um, to have so many options, and at the core of what you do, advisory is paramount, and really what we should be teaching to those solopreneurs, to our young professionals, to the people in industry now. Um, that's the critical moments.
One of the things that I'm trying to break into also is the idea of idea that we are only secluded to a very particular tight range of work. And for instance, when throughout my these past year and a half or two, uh, I started interacting with other CPAs working in different fields and industries. And one of the interesting thing here is even my ignorant brain was like, look, I know you're in every industry, but when someone asked me about, hey, like, so there's this whole real estate group, like, what is it that they do? Are they just doing bookkeeping? And I'm like, I would doubt that very highly. I mean, I'm sure there's bookkeeping involved, but I'm sure they do other things. They're like, well, so what do they do? I don't know. Right? And that light bulb moment for me was like, look, I'm decades into my career and I'm ignorant as all heck. Right? And so now I'm thinking, for anyone who wants to start talking about their specific field of expertise, let me know, right? But it's interesting, right? Because again, most of us coming straight out of college is, hey, do tax, do audit, do right, and you realize, hey, there's real estate seems stupid and boring and mundane and whatever, and then you realize, hey, they're doing some crazy deals. You get to sit in the driver's seat and figure out what is all the complex planning mechanisms that make some of these high rise or commercial or farms, right? Like what is it that they need to make sure that this project goes without failing, right? And you go into the estate side of, look, your parents, your grandparents, depending on generation, they're gonna be in a situation where they realize, hey, we amassed all of this wealth so that we can protect our family, and yet, either A, like the one thing that gave me like legit anxiety was they found out recently that they had like tens or if not hundreds of millions of dollars of assets, no will, none, right? And I was like, what? No, that can't be right. And I sure enough talked to Grandpa, and he's like, yeah, I don't know. I just spent my whole life working. I just never thought about. And I was like, okay, first and foremost, go talk to an attorney. Yeah, I mean,
You
like,
can put my name on that.
if you want to dot me, no, right?
Yep.
And it's one of those things of like, you're not a spring chicken. At the very least, get a will. But as a CPA, my brain is going around. Are there trusts set up? Right? Did you consider who's going to get what? He's like, oh, well, I mean, I spent my whole life working on heavy machinery. I'm not that smart. I'm not that smart of a man. I'm like, you're smart enough to make that kind of money, right? So in this particular field now, most people don't think about that, right? They think, oh, it's just taxes. No, that's a whole different field. You talk to someone who does trust and estates on the tax end, the complexity in that is absurd. However, there is so much money in that, right? Most people coming out of college, even early in a career, and some people like me, dum-dums like me, didn't consider that there is a whole dedicated field where you could start doing not just, this is your tax liability, this is how much you're going to save, you could do 4D chess, right? Hey, I see your lifestyle is X, Y, and Z. I see that your children are this, that, and third. Your concerns are this, and this, and this, and this. How can we work together to map out something that makes it safe for you and your inheritors, right? Your beneficiaries and your family, right? Your family. How can we work together so that this is something that grows or contracts the way you need it to while you're still alive, protects your family, and doesn't guarantee anything, obviously, but it does ensure that you could sleep with a little more peace at the end of the night, saying, hey, if God forbid something happens, because I think he was in his mid-70s at that point, right? God forbid something happens, you don't have to worry about things get stuck in probate. You don't have, right? I'm talking big words, but ultimately, right, like essentially you're saying, hey, I want to make sure that my kids don't get screwed because I worked my whole life to protect my family, right? And maybe you want to do good in the world. Well, was that written somewhere? No, I told my wife that one day I want to do this, that, and a third. Okay, well, you have a tax person, right? She's like, yeah. They never talked about this with you? No. Okay, so you should have that conversation. Or find someone who specializes in that field. Ta-da, right? And when I talk to some folks, they're like, oh, I don't want to do these 1040s anymore. I'm like, dude, you have a fundamental understanding, a baseline in taxes. If you don't want to do this baseline work, there's options. Did you ever think about getting into trust and estate planning? Have you ever thought about going into succession planning? Have you thought about, right? Like if you are interested in other things, but it's related to tax, you don't have to stay in just baseline tax. Get your fundamentals, right? Expand. This goes to every other field. I'm finding almost every week at this point, there's so much variability. And for me, I hated the mundane, tedious tasks. And for me, I think it mortified some people, but I told them I feel like I'm the fraudulent CPA, right? In that in growing up, I didn't fit any of those boxes of what a CPA is supposed to be, right?
I think that there's a good amount of people just like you that are on the fringes of the work that's done in the core and the center of what a stereotypical CPA might look like. Um, I mean, the roles of leadership in this community fringe on that work. Some CPAs don't touch a document at all, but they're just leading other CPAs. So there's a wide range of opportunity. There's just a story that we tell that there's only one script.
I think this is why my conversations with you tend to like the convers like we had a phone call maybe a couple of weeks ago at this point, and after that phone conversation, there was like I didn't realize till after the fact, but there was like a deep like a sigh of relief, right? Because like I mean like because for me I realized a couple of things, right, as I was doing my own soul searching. Like there was, yes, I did do the tedious mundane tasks. I did do the mundane work. And my claim to fame was I optimized everything. Why? Because I didn't want to do the mundane task. I want to get it done as efficiently and effectively as possible. So what did I do? I built tools, right? But in my heart of hearts, as I was exploring this, the partnerships and the channels and organization, I realized I love learning a topic and almost evangelizing this new great thing that could help you and your company and all these other things. And I realized, am I crazy? Am I committing career suicide? Am I going to regret this 3 years down the line? Because now I have a family that I need to provide for, right? And a small part, if I'm being completely honest, there's a small part of me that is like, Alex, you're going to fail. Alex, your family's going to look at you like you're a loser. Alex, you're not going to do what you're supposed to do. Your job is to provide for your family, right?
There it is. There it is. Imposter syndrome. Boom, 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 boom. Right? It's like the underlying responsibility or commitment to when you say you want to be a CPA, boom, imposter syndrome like attaches itself to your whole persona. Why? I don't know. I don't know if you guys get when I say you guys, you all, girls included, women, men, everyone, but it's like this thing, like if the numbers don't align, then I'm not of value. No way, no way. That's not the determinant factor. You don't have to actually be an expert at everything, by the way. You could be learning it and teaching it in the same breath. In fact, that's what's going to be more the norm. Learn something, teach it. Learn something, teach it. We see it now. People are learning so quickly, gaining access to information. So your understanding, and basically what you're saying is, at some point in time in our lives, whether or not we think we can, we have to. We have to. And the other thing is, you don't know everything from the go. You have to experience stuff. Those solopreneurs that are going out are experiencing what it's like to do something. They have to do it. To your point, you have to live your journey, right? So you're giving your friends good advice. You're not taking it very much for yourself. But, 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 that path is so unique and so personal for everybody. Take the path, but also know taking the journey and it leading to a different destination than you anticipated is not equivalent to failure. Its equivalent is learning. You have to change your mindset. Have a flexible mindset. Recognize the value in change and the lessons learned, and then apply them to get closer to passion or the desired state. And then that's where the real money hits anyway.
For me, even myself, I found myself having to remind myself that that advice isn't some kind of cliche, woo woo, not like verbal nonsense, right? Because there's always going to be someone who's going to be like, oh, yeah, that sounds great, right? But, that's not my reality. Okay, well, fine. Then you're right? It's whether you can't, that other cliche thing of whether you think you can or cannot, you're right. And I remember telling my take your own advice, Alex. I tell my son because he has been reticent to try new things, but inevitably, as you go through iterations, he gets comfortable with what it is. He starts to thrive. And I told him, look, you're not, and I don't know where he learned this from, but like I'm a loser. I'm like, excuse me. Why do you think that? Well, first off, well, we'll get to that later, but I want to know where you learned that from. But first off, why do you think that? Because I didn't get it. So for me, it's you're not a loser per se if you didn't get it right. You're a loser if you quit just because you think it's hard. All right. It's one thing to say like this isn't for me and whatever, and you truly like feel that. That's one thing. But I'm not gonna let you quit just because you're not good at it. Right. And so now like there's more things that you want to try, and there's I think on the CPA accounting end we are trained that hey it's right or it's wrong. There may be multiple paths to get there, but ultimately the answer has to be right. Right. Or your credibility is nil. Which for me, I think yes, there are definitely instances, right? Like you don't want to file something where things are like egregiously incorrect. However, the path to get there, and when I see again, this goes outside of CPAs. This goes for majority of, if not all of the people that I know that are successful, has been I just try to keep going until I fail. That is where my growth is. If I keep getting things right every day, I know something's off. That means I'm doing something that is putting me in the complacency well complacency lane, and that's dangerous for me, right? And so for me, that's where again, as uncomfortable as it is, I'm pivoting into this weird career track that I previously would have thought was career suicide. And for me, it's like I'm okay with being wrong. Don't ruin any lives. Don't hurt nobody. Right? Don't don't do anything unethical or illegal. Right? All the baseline stuff. Beyond that, make some mistakes. But for me, it's the hey Alex, I was wondering how does this X, Y, and Z work? If I do this, this, and this, can I do X, Y, and Z? If I don't know the answer, I'm like honestly, I need to get back to you on that. That has been mortifying for me. Mortifying because
Have you ever made a cake? Have you ever done it wrong? And you keep trying because we all like cake, right? Who doesn't like cake? So here's the thing. If you look at the end result, the end game, and in coaching, lots of times we say, write your own eulogy so that you could go backwards in time. You could see what it takes to get you to that end state, the end game. And it's interesting because if you took where you want to be and looked back, it's all a recipe to get to that, yummy goodness and who we want to be. But in order to do that, it's you got to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You got to mix it all up, right? And then you got to let it marinate for a little while or set for a little while. And you got to bake it. You got, all of these things. And so lots of people just want to eat cake. Right? It's just, that's what we want to do. I don't want all of the steps, myself included. Early on in my career, I thought I was ready for this moment. No way. No way. I needed to grow through all of these things. I needed to challenge myself. I worked for myself for 13 years. This was huge change for me. Every day it's change. To log into somebody else's system, to wear a new logo, change. Oh my God. And if you really know me, this is hard. Um, and I'm loving every minute of it because there's lots of lessons learned. But it was all a recipe. If I look back at the positions I took, to your point, career suicide, I went from being HR professional to a director of marketing and business development, two totally different disciplines. I had to do it because now when I look back and I'm a growth strategist with a people purpose, it's marketing and HR that made me this. It was all these little pieces that you piece together and you put together to make a whole self. So if your track, Alex, and this has become your personal coaching session here this morning, but if you look at your track and you see a little business development and the way that you light up when you talk about real estate and accounting together, all of those things, and the fact that you like to talk about it in publicly and you have this great network, that job description is your recipe. You just got to find out what that cake looks like. It's going to be delicious, but it's those pieces. And so for everyone, really, you could have one ingredient all your life, or you could try to spice it up. You could all of those. So why am I talking about cake? It's only 10:30 in the morning. My goodness. So, that's it's just simple like that. And some people might get the understanding, but really there's nothing you could do wrong. That's the biggest fallacy I think in life. And even with what's happening in PE, they're not getting it wrong. They've done this. It's been done. Been done. Painted it done already. Um, it's it's what the end result is going to look like. That's really important, and where you find yourself fitting in, which is human connection.
I am curious to see how this pans out because in my head I always tend to map out as if they were like parallel universes. I kind of tend to theory craft all these possibilities and then try to backtrack. Well, if these sets of realities were to be true, and I try to reverse engineer what would need to happen for it to, right? And there is an interesting number of variables. Obviously, there's AI everything, quote unquote, right? Which tides are going out, so we're seeing which ones are actually legit and how many thousands of these are nonsense. But that's not to say that could change, right? Like that for me, that for me, it's a very interesting variable. But we're also seeing like, hey, I think there's a lot of people in this day and age who are kind of faced with an existential analysis or an accounting, if you will, pun intended, of, where am I in life? What is it that I truly am looking for fulfillment? And look, let's not get too woo woo because look, sometimes the answer is you just need to embrace that some parts of your job just suck, right? But how much of it does it suck? What is that suck, right? And on the flip side of it, how much of it do you find actual meaning, like value, and does it also provide you as a big picture in your life? Again, I apologize for woo woo, but like, does it provide you the means to really enjoy your life, right? And it's complex, but sometimes I talk to some folks that I mentor from colleges and all that, and they're like, look, honestly, there are certain things that you just have to embrace the suck, man, right? Like you're not gonna grow in a area or realm where there's no friction or static. Like that, you need friction. You need to be uncomfortable with that discomfort sometimes because it's a signal. Either A, you're growing, or B, if it's deep and like gross enough, maybe that's your reality saying, hey, it's time for a pivot, buddy. Like it's time for you to explore and take time to really analyze what is it that you really like viscerally hate about this thing, right? Because if it's just discomfort, sorry, man, like maybe you just need to get through it and get the repetitions, and eventually you realize that it's just a step in the process. Or if you viscerally hate it, maybe instead of doing this 15 years down the line, realizing, oh, my life was a travesty, explore that. Like take the time. And I think that's where, stop the doom scroll, take a look and say, hey, I hated this. Like not this, like I hated this. Why? And is there something that is adjacent to, or maybe it's just a complete pivot? And for me, it's like, look, the world isn't ending. Things will change. But for me, it's how you handle whatever those variables, like as they come, how do you assess and how do you pivot as needed, right? It's course correction. At the end of the day,
Our conversation is such a Marvel movie for me.
uh,
We're talking about Endgame. We're talking about Spider-Man. These are the things.
but the macro generally is about the same, no? Right? Like at the end of the day, there's always a it's a pyramid for a reason, right? Like usually the top is the top, but you don't need to be the top 0.1%, right? So for me, it's like you want to be a solopreneur. God bless. And I still think that's a very important thing to do. However, also understand that along the way, there's a lot of people who start business in general, and a lot of them don't succeed or they just keep pivoting to other things, and that doesn't make it bad or wrong or them or makes them lesser than. It's just a part of the process, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh God, if I don't even think for one second it crossed my mind that joining a national consulting practice and closing matters of management, a company that I've ran by myself for 13 years. I mean, despite having staff and not having staff and, according the company at different times, you never look at my decision to join them as a failure on being a business owner. In fact, I think it's a huge success that I was able to do the things that I was able to do. And I've been given an opportunity to continue to succeed alongside other people. So, um, again, I think it's mindset. I think it's the story you tell yourself, the narrative of the industry, that there is this only one way, and this is the script. Um, I think, if there's anything really that I'll be reinforced with in this conversation this morning, is that, your story is really unwritten, and there's no wrong. So that's comforting.
I mean, at this juncture, I do find myself curious in terms of at this particular point in time, what is it that drives you?
It's been the reason or the purpose. I think that when you get to know me, you know that my my best self is when I'm helping others. And I learned that early on in my career, and I knew that I wasn't going to be as effective as I wanted to be working just for one company and only helping the people in that company. I wanted to affect at scale change for as many individuals, as many organizations as possible. I didn't know at the time that that meant consulting. No idea. I had no idea that the terminology human resources existed, or that, coming from a place where I had quit high school and thought I was going to be a poet, that I would go on to become a doctor and write books and, have the life that I have. But the one common theme of what drives me has always been, and I think will always be, this uh, the reason for why I do the things that I do is to help and affect change, help people and affect change, in a positive way. That is the purpose. It's the reason.
Yourself call you a sellout now, doctor?
Doctor. Yeah. Um, I think that, um, I did it to prove to my younger self that there's no script. That even when I talk to parents today and they say that, when they ask the questions, where's your child going to college immediately after high school? To me, that conversation really should be non-existent, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you quit high school. It doesn't matter if you go to Syracuse or Penn State. It doesn't matter if you go to that one course. What kind of matters if you go to that one course at Harvard that taught all how to buy public accounting firms. But it doesn't matter what age you are when you get your doctorate. It doesn't, it just really doesn't matter. It's so very personal. And if I think what it taught my younger self is that there's not one way. And if you don't do it the way that everybody else is doing it, right? The story of FOMO, that you're still going to be okay. In fact, you're going to be even better. That's the story I hope my younger self, feels connected to.
Some angry messages. Hey, I just told my parents that I don't need to go to college. Dr. Anevski says so. you know,
You don't, you don't have to do anything. I mean, you have to do something, but you don't have to do that.
There was I mean, this is probably a whole nother topic, but I did raise a lot of eyebrows when I was like, look, honestly, I'm okay if my kids don't go to college, provided there's a plan forward, right? And they're like, oh my God, how could you? I'm like, look, man, I grew up in an era where collecting credentials was the thing to maybe get an entry level job, right? Do you have your bachelor's? Oh, okay. How about your master's? No, no. Ooh, 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 right? And no, now I look at a lot of kids in my generation, and it's like, dude, you're still paying. Like before you buy a house, you have a mortgage. It's called your student loan debt. And for me, it turned into like, look, just find do something, right? That is in service of you and your future self, right? And that also includes providing for oneself, right? So if that turns out to be something else other than your traditional path, then take it. But work, do the thing you set out to do, right? And for part of it here is I caught myself in my own thing because like, oh yeah, Amy is going ahead and she's gonna take a gap year. I'm like, wait, hold up. Why am I having that reaction? It's like, okay, well, why is it that they want to take gap year? They need to explore. Okay, right? And then for me, I'm like, okay, I had that unprogramming to do of like, hey, like keeping up with the Andersons, keeping up with the who knows, right? Like, look, it's your path, right? You're not a dumb kid. You're not unambitious, right? You're saying, hey, before I invest myself into anything, I need to figure out, I need to reset. And outside of high school has a very strict, hey, do this, do that, regurgitate this, and this. I want to figure out like before I take a next step, figure out what is it that is important to me, and not just party, not get drunk, and like do all sorts of ridiculous crap. Some people may need to do that, but for her, it was just I need to figure out like if I'm going to take this next step in my life, career, whatever it is, I want to understand that I'm doing it because it makes sense to me and not just because someone told me to do it. And I was like, perfect, beautiful, beautiful, you know. But there's also a lot of ways without college. Now we're seeing. I'm maybe for a future conversation. I am curious because I am seeing a trend of folks who are hiring based off of actual performance and not credentials. I love that. I love that. But for me, I guess the curiosity is how does that what does that process look like, right? And
It's very simple to me, and we could end it on this note because I do think that it's a very small club, and with 100-year problem of not having a pipeline. Um, Although I think that that's also a story because you don't. I mean, in actuality, there's only one person who signs off on documents that requires a CPA. Only one. You only need one, right? And that's it. So why does everybody who touches the materials that are involved in the one person's signature have to be that credential? And that has always been an issue for me, that we can't have this flexible mindset to say, wow, I really need someone who types very quickly, or someone who thinks very quickly, or someone who problem solves very quickly, or someone who's got great business acumen, psychology of people, the sale, someone who's got digital expertise to bring in options for us. Why do all of those people have to be one way educated, one way certified, one way? I mean, as an HR professional, that's really that's like a reverse exclusion, you know. So I think that that there's lots of conversation around being more inclusive with different types of people. Years ago, I spoke at ASCPA about why I thought you should hire engineers in accounting, why I thought you should hire psychologists in accounting, and bartenders. We could have another conversation about that. Not get drunk at work, but behaviorally, the bartender is a great one for the industry. So again, it's this one way of doing things. It's what your neighbors are doing. It's what the people in the industry are doing. We have to do it their way, and that's dead. It's just gone.
what the world's going to look like in the near future, But with you in it, I think definitely for sure the companies that you're affecting are definitely winning on the winning side of resources. So for those who are looking to internalize a better way to have a system where you could train your successor, you have none other than Dr. Rachel Anevski. And also for those who are kind of curious into the history and the model in which most of these accounting and law firms have been operating over these past years and years into the future, you have Accounting for Times, Evolver to Solve. As always, Dr. Anevski, I'm so glad you made time for this. Thank you so much.
Always. Thank you so much.
For those of you out there, once again, if you have any questions, come reach out. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.